Pete Buttigieg has two weird takes on the Democratic primary. The first is that it is already down to just two people. And the second is that somehow he's one of those two. In an interview that's gonna be broadcast on Showtime on Sunday, he said that the race is getting to be a two-way between him and Elizabeth Warren. Quote, "A world where we're getting somewhere is that world where it's coming down to the two of us." This was news to everyone who's watching the polls and knows that we haven't even gotten into the primaries and caucuses yet. But joining us now to break down Pete Buttigieg's read of the Democratic primary, Emma Vigeland of Rebel HQ. Emma, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, John.
Great to have you here. So I mistakenly thought that there were still like 12 people in this race, but apparently there's only two. What do you think?
Yeah, well, it takes a very specific kind of arrogance to believe that, and it's the same kind of arrogance that would propel a small town, college town mayor into the presidential race when he has really no experience. That is really a crystallization of the issues surrounding Pete Buttigieg, the many issues that I'm sure we're going to get into later in the segment.
Yeah, and it's such wishful thinking. It's very Trumpian almost. It's like, I don't want to run against Bernie Sanders, so out of that part of the party, I'm going to choose Elizabeth Warren, and I'm going to pretend that Joe Biden is doing worse than he is, because shockingly, somehow Joe Biden is still doing well in the polls. So I'm just going to assume that I'm going to replace him, which is sort of forecasting what he really thinks about his position in the Democratic Party. But to believe that you can just skip past all this stuff, I honestly don't even know what the purpose of that quote is. It feels like, if anything, that's just gonna lead to Joe Biden attacking him, if not the others.
Yeah, I'm sure that's really what his consultants are telling him, and he's just broadcasting it to the world, because he really does have that specific kind of arrogance that only certain white men possess. And
nobody has that arrogance better than me. Nobody.
Right. Nobody. But it's also fascinating. Does he not realize that non-white people are going to be voting in this primary? I mean, he has zero support among black people. Elizabeth Warren is struggling to get support from black people in the polls as well. So there are two candidates, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, who has increased his support significantly since 2016, who are doing very well with black voters, and they are the most significant and active voting bloc in a Democratic primary. So Buttigieg might want to remember that, although he's conveniently probably forgot about that, since his history with racism in his town is so terrible.
As TYT has done a lot of work to try to shed light on. Yeah, he's in a lot of these polls amongst black voters. He's at 0%. He's not the only one, by the way. I advise all of our viewers to dig into the crosstabs, because I've discovered some really interesting stuff recently. But that is a big issue for him, and to imply that he's already got this thing half locked down, that is a really arrogant position. Both of them need to do, I think, quite a bit more to diversify their voting base. I mean, we're still far out, and I know that like Buttigieg is like banking on doing really well in Iowa. That'll show how he does with diverse voters. But I don't know, I feel like he's getting really far ahead of himself. I don't know, maybe it's a good strategy.
Oh, of course. And for Elizabeth Warren, I don't even necessarily think it's anything she's doing wrong. It's kind of the same thing that happened to Bernie Sanders in 2016, where a lot of black voters in the South are just naturally skeptical. People in the South, I guess, are naturally skeptical. And Joe Biden has made a lot of inroads based on just his history and his past connection to President Obama. Bernie Sanders, being an advocate for the community and getting more name recognition, has allowed him to make inroads with black voters down in the South as well. Elizabeth Warren's a fresher face on the scene, but Buttigieg's actual history with racist policing is going to hurt him, and I imagine it's going to be difficult for him to overcome it, unlike Elizabeth Warren, who can make inroads in that area.
Well, let's talk about another area of history for Pete Buttigieg. He's made like a lot of his supporters very happy in the last debate when he was attacking both Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, but mainly Elizabeth Warren over Medicare for all. And people were interested to find out that back just in 2018, he had tweeted, "I, Pete Buttigieg, politician, do henceforth and forthwith declare, most affirmatively and indubitably, unto the ages that I do favor Medicare for all, as I do favor any measure that would help get all Americans covered. Now, if you'll excuse me, potholes await." That's not the only tweet, but he had been much more of a proponent of Medicare for all even to just last year. And now the centerpiece of his campaign on substantive grounds is attacking the very concept of Medicare for all.
Because Pete Buttigieg only believes in one thing. Pete Buttigieg. I mean, he went on cable news and talked about how Medicare for all was the compromise position on healthcare, and how we need to talk about it as such, that it's the centrist position as opposed to nationalizing everything or privatizing everything. It's somewhere in between. And then just months later, at the end of the year, he said that in February, he's now saying that Medicare for all is completely impossible and a ridiculous pipe dream, and attacking Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders on those grounds. That's what happens when you're nakedly ambitious and don't have principles.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.